I discovered my husband had been faking his love for years to get access to my trust fund. The marriage certificate felt like sandpaper in my trembling hands as I stared at the date. We signed it 3 years ago. My husband sat across from me at our kitchen table, his coffee growing cold, completely unaware that I had just discovered the most devastating truth of my life. He was scrolling through his phone, probably checking his investment portfolio again, while I struggled to process what I had learned just hours earlier. The trust fund documents scattered across the mahogany surface told a story I never wanted to believe was possible. It started when I decided to surprise him with a weekend getaway for our anniversary. I had been planning this trip for months, wanting to recreate our honeymoon in the mountains where we first said we loved each other. While looking for our old photos in his office desk, I stumbled upon a folder labeled Financial Planning that I had never seen before. Inside were printouts of my trust fund details, bank statements, and investment projections that went back 5 years. What caught my attention was the timeline. These documents were dated months before we even met. My heart sank as I realized the implications. He had researched my family's wealth, my inheritance, and my trust fund access dates long before our accidental meeting at that coffee shop downtown. The romantic story we always told friends about bumping into each other while reaching for the same book suddenly felt orchestrated and fake. I remembered how he had seemed so interested in my family history during our early dates, asking detailed questions about my grandmother's estate and my father's business ventures. The evidence was overwhelming. There were notes in his handwriting about my trust fund maturation dates, my family's real estate holdings, and even sketches of our house's floor plan with calculations of its market value. He had created a detailed timeline of our relationship milestones that corresponded perfectly with different phases of accessing my inheritance. Our engagement happened right after my 25th birthday, when I gained access to the first portion of my trust. Our wedding was scheduled just months before I could access the larger sum at 28. I felt physically sick as I continued reading through his meticulous planning. There were printed emails between him and someone discussing investment strategies using my future inheritance. The correspondence revealed that he had been working with a financial advisor to plan how to maximize returns on money that wasn't even his yet. They discussed various scenarios for gaining access to my funds, including marriage timelines and legal strategies for joint asset management. My phone buzzed with a text from my younger sister, asking if I was still coming to her graduation party next weekend. She had always been suspicious of my husband, claiming he asked too many questions about our family's finances during holiday dinners. I had defended him, thinking she was just being protective, but now her concerns seemed prophetic. She had once mentioned that he seemed more interested in talking to our father about business deals than actually getting to know our family as people. The worst part was realizing how many moments I had misinterpreted as genuine affection. His interest in my daily routines, his insistence on handling our joint finances, his enthusiasm for meeting my extended family. It all made sense now through this horrible new lens. He had been studying me like a business opportunity, learning my habits and preferences not out of love, but as part of his long-term financial strategy. That evening, I decided to test my suspicions by casually mentioning that I was considering donating a significant portion of my inheritance to charity. His reaction was immediate and telling. His face went pale, and he spent the next hour trying to convince me that such a decision would be financially irresponsible. He suggested we should discuss any major financial decisions together, emphasizing how my money could be better invested for our future. The conversation felt calculated, like he was following a script he had rehearsed for this exact scenario. I began noticing other red flags that I had previously ignored. He had never really integrated into my social circle, preferring to keep our relationship somewhat isolated from my longtime friends. When I mentioned wanting to travel abroad for an extended period, he always found reasons why we should stay local and focus on building our life here. Now I understood that my geographic location was tied to my access to local banking and legal services for my trust fund. The documentation revealed that he had been in contact with a private investigator who had provided detailed background information about my family's wealth and my personal financial situation. The investigator's report included photos of our house, details about my daily routines, and even information about my closest relationships. Reading through this invasion of privacy felt like discovering I had been living with a stranger who had been collecting intelligence about my life. My best friend from college called that night, and I found myself wanting to confide in her about what I had discovered. She had always been a good judge of character, and I remembered her expressing some concerns about how quickly my relationship had moved from dating to marriage. She had mentioned that he seemed unusually interested in the financial aspects of our wedding planning, particularly the budget and who was paying for what expenses. I spent the next few days observing his behavior with fresh eyes, looking for signs of the deception I now knew existed. He continued his normal routine of checking financial markets in the morning, but I noticed he spent extra time reviewing accounts that included my trust fund contributions. When mail arrived from my financial advisor, he showed more interest than usual, asking questions about the contents and suggesting we should meet with the advisor together soon. The turning point came when I discovered he had been secretly photographing important documents in my personal safe. I had installed a small security camera in my office months earlier after some valuable jewelry went missing, thinking we might have had a break-in. Reviewing the footage from recent weeks, I saw him carefully documenting my personal financial records, insurance policies, and legal documents when he thought I was asleep or away from home. His methodical approach to cataloging my assets was chilling. He had photographed my passport, social security card, and various financial account information. The timestamps on the camera footage showed this had been happening regularly for months, always during times when I was predictably occupied with other activities. He had created a comprehensive record of my personal information that would give him significant leverage in any future financial or legal proceedings. When I confronted him indirectly by mentioning that I had noticed some documents in my safe had been moved, his response was defensive and overly detailed. He provided an elaborate explanation about looking for our homeowner's insurance policy after a neighbor mentioned updating theirs. The story felt rehearsed, and his body language suggested he was uncomfortable with the questioning. I realized that his quick thinking and smooth explanations had probably helped him navigate many similar situations throughout our relationship. The final piece of evidence came from an unexpected source. My father's business partner mentioned during a family dinner that someone had been asking questions about our family's financial situation at their country club. The inquiries had been subtle but persistent, focusing on details about trusts, inheritance timelines, and family business structures. The physical description of the person asking these questions matched my husband perfectly, and the timeline coincided with the early stages of our relationship. I decided to conduct my own investigation by accessing our joint credit card statements and bank records. The financial trail revealed a pattern of expenses that supported his deceptive behavior. There were payments to the private investigator, charges for legal consultations about marriage and property law, and even expenses for specialized software used to track investment portfolios. He had been building a comprehensive financial strategy centered around my inheritance while maintaining the facade of a loving marriage. My mother called to check on me, and I found myself struggling to maintain normal conversation while processing this betrayal. She had always liked my husband, praising his attentiveness and his apparent devotion to our relationship. Knowing that her approval had been based on his performance, rather than genuine character, made the deception feel even more profound. I wondered how many other people in my life had been fooled by his carefully crafted persona. The emotional impact of this discovery was overwhelming. Every anniversary, every romantic gesture, every declaration of love now felt tainted by the knowledge of his ulterior motives. I questioned my own judgment and wondered how I had missed so many warning signs. The man I had fallen in love with and married was essentially a fictional character, created to manipulate me into providing access to my family's wealth. I began making plans to protect myself legally and financially. I consulted with an attorney who specialized in marriage fraud and asset protection, learning about my options for safeguarding my inheritance and potentially pursuing legal action. The lawyer explained that proving financial fraud in marriage cases could be complex, but was definitely possible given the evidence I had gathered. We discussed strategies for securing my assets and documenting his deceptive behavior. My sister offered to help me gather additional evidence by pretending to be interested in her own financial planning and asking my husband for advice. During their conversation, he revealed extensive knowledge about trust fund structures and inheritance law that seemed inconsistent with his claimed background. He provided detailed advice about maximizing access to family wealth through marriage and legal partnerships, essentially outlining the exact strategy he had used against me. The confrontation I had been dreading finally became unavoidable when I discovered he had been forging my signature on documents related to my trust fund. He had submitted forms to my financial advisor, requesting changes to my account access and beneficiary information. The forgery was sophisticated enough to pass initial review, but I caught the discrepancy when reviewing my monthly statements. This crossed the line from emotional betrayal into clear criminal fraud. When I finally confronted him with all the evidence, his initial response was denial, followed by attempts to minimize the significance of his actions. He claimed that his research about my financial situation had been motivated by love and a desire to build our future together. His explanations became increasingly desperate as I presented more documentation of his deceptive behavior. The man I had married completely disappeared, replaced by someone calculating and manipulative. His final attempt to salvage the situation involved emotional manipulation, claiming that he had genuinely fallen in love with me despite his original intentions. He insisted that his feelings had evolved from strategic interest to real affection, and that our marriage had become authentic over time. The appeal felt hollow, given the extensive evidence of his continued deception throughout our entire relationship. I realized that even this final conversation was probably part of his strategy to maintain access to my assets. The divorce proceedings revealed the full extent of his financial planning around my inheritance. His attorney had prepared documents that would have given him significant rights to my trust fund and family assets in the event of divorce or my death. The prenuptial agreement, I thought, was designed to protect both of us had actually been crafted to maximize his potential claims on my wealth. Every legal document in our marriage had been structured to serve his long-term financial interests. As I sit here now, months after discovering the truth, I am rebuilding my life with a clearer understanding of how sophisticated financial predators operate. The experience has taught me to trust my instincts and to be more cautious about people who show excessive interest in my personal finances. I have implemented new security measures for my assets and developed a support network of professionals who help me navigate relationships and financial decisions with greater awareness. The most difficult part of recovery has been learning to trust my own judgment again. I second-guess every interaction, wondering if I am missing signs of deception or manipulation. My family and friends have been supportive, but I struggle with embarrassment about how completely I was fooled. The realization that someone could sustain such an elaborate deception for years has fundamentally changed how I approach relationships and trust. Looking back, I can see that there were warning signs I ignored or rationalized away. His reluctance to discuss his own family background, his exceptional knowledge of financial planning despite claiming no formal training, and his consistent steering of conversations toward my family's wealth should have raised red flags. I was blinded by what I thought was love, but which was actually a carefully crafted performance designed to secure my trust and access to my inheritance. The legal resolution of my case has provided some closure, but the emotional healing continues. I have learned to value relationships based on genuine connection rather than romantic gestures that might be motivated by hidden agendas. My trust fund remains secure, and I have established new protocols for protecting my financial information and assets from future predators. The experience has made me more cautious, but also more determined to live authentically. My advice to anyone who suspects they might be in a similar situation is to trust their instincts and seek professional help immediately. Financial predators are often skilled at emotional manipulation and can maintain their deceptions for years. The sooner you gather evidence and protect your assets, the better your chances of minimizing the damage. Do not let embarrassment or hope for reconciliation prevent you from taking decisive action to safeguard your future. The person I married never really existed. He was a character created specifically to gain access to my inheritance, and every aspect of our relationship was calculated to serve that goal. Understanding this has been painful but ultimately liberating. I am now free to build genuine relationships based on mutual respect and authentic connection, rather than hidden financial agendas. The betrayal was devastating, but surviving it has made me stronger and more self-aware than ever before.